And now, a next-level moment from AT&T Business. Say you've sent out a gigantic shipment of pillows, and they need to be there in time for International Sleep Day. You've got AT&T 5G, so you're fully confident. But the vendor isn't responding, and International Sleep Day is tomorrow. Luckily, AT&T 5G lets you deal with any issues with ease, so the pillows will get delivered and everyone can sleep soundly, especially you. AT&T 5G requires a compatible plan and device. Coverage not available everywhere. Learn more at att.com/5G network.
Seven things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Jamie East, and this is the Sunday 7. On today's episode of the award-winning Sunday 7 in association with Metro, we hear about a new AI-powered blood test to detect cancer, we get worried by bird flu, and find out what the new colour OLO looks like. Plus, Will Guyatt, the Smart 7's resident tech guru, has the latest on big tech's battles with the government and why being polite to AI is costing us a fortune. If you're enjoying the episodes, please do like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We're here 7 days a week at 7 a.m. with the 7 biggest stories on the Smart 7 in association with Metro. Before we get started, though, it was on this day in 1828 that the London Zoological Gardens, Britain's first scientific zoo, opened in Regent's Park. At first, it was only open to members of the Zoological Society, and the purpose was to research animals in captivity. It wasn't until 1847 the public were finally allowed in, partly to help fund the costs of caring for so many exotic animals.
7.
We've covered the impact of AI on medicine for a while now on the Sunday 7, but the pace of change and the impact it's having seems to be accelerating. This week saw a major clinical trial of AI-driven technology that could have a huge impact on cancer diagnosis get underway as a blood test that could detect 12 different types of cancer thanks to AI's processing power is rolled out. We have been down this road before though, although without the AI element, as the biotech startup Theranos reached a valuation of $9 billion, all on the back of promises to detect illnesses from just a few drops of blood. That was 10 years ago, and the founder and CEO Elizabeth Holmes was sentenced to 11 years in prison over the scandal back in 2022. The difference now, though, is that technology has advanced and that AI enables greater and faster data analysis, as Dr. Andy Shapanis, who's chief exec of a company called Xgenera, who've developed the new test, explains.
So far, the data is really compelling. We're using a method called qPCR, which you've probably heard of throughout the COVID pandemic. You took a nasal swab, sent it off for PCR testing. It's cheap, it's scalable. So it's kind of a lot more of a standardised, well-trusted technology that we're using.
The test detects what's known as microRNAs in the blood, which are tiny fragments of what could be cancer, and it's expected to be able to detect early signs of 12 types of cancer, including lung, breast and bowel. The government's committed £2.4 million to develop the test, and Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who himself is a cancer survivor, was at the Francis Crick Institute this week to announce the funding for the project.
We want to make sure that the UK is a world leader when it comes to the discovery of new diagnostics and new treatments so that cancer is not a death sentence.
Early detection is vital, particularly for bowel cancer, with 9 out of 10 patients surviving the disease if it's detected at stage 1. The lab at the Institute, which is also funded by Cancer Research UK, has been renamed the Bowel Babe Lab in memory of Deborah James and the funding she raised for research into the disease. There's more work and innovation going on too in the area of colorectal surgery, with the deployment of robotic assistance for surgeons to improve the speed and efficiency of operations. Nuha Yassin is a consultant robotic colorectal surgeon at Solihull Hospital, and she says it's really important to push the technology forward, but in a safe and cautious way.
Here in the UK, the adoption can sometimes seem to be a bit slower, but we do things with great governance, with great care, and ensure that technology certainly is implemented in a safe way. Certainly in neurology, robotic assisted surgery have been performed in the UK for over 10 years. The adoption has been slightly slower in other specialties, and we have to ensure in the UK that we have equity of access, not just for the surgeons, but certainly for the patients. That's improving over time, and this nice publication is timely.
2024 was definitely the year of big tech versus big law, but 2025 saw things take a turn as Donald Trump's presence in the White House seems to embolden the tech bros. We had Elon musking all over the US government, Mark Zuckerberg growing his hair and sacking his fact-checkers, but while that kind of malarkey might play well in the United States, things look quite different in Europe. When it comes to putting big tech on the naughty step, there's only one slightly erratic disciplinarian we'd trust, and that's the Smart 7's tech guru Will Guyatt. So Will, yet again, it seems like Europe's not happy with big tech.
Yeah, and it's not just Europe either. Big tech has been getting slapped around all over the shop by big law worldwide. We've seen monstrous fines for Google in Japan and India, and moves that will change the apps available on Android phones in the Far East, and how TVs in India use the increasingly popular Android TV. And then we got closer to the reality this week that the US government seemingly wants to break up both Google and Meta for dominance in their respective markets. And that's before we get closer to home in Europe, where both Apple and Meta have felt the growing wrath of the EU's Digital Markets Act law. And that appears to have bigger, hungrier teeth than the UK's Online Safety Act, which is slowly coming to life.
What I'm taking from that is hungry teeth. What are the fines for this time?
Meta have been clobbered with a €200 million fine for the amount of data they're collecting about European consumers on its platforms, despite thinking that the offer of a paid, ad-free version of Facebook would help them avoid this. Well, Apple picked up around a €500 million fine for stifling competition and restricting choice by not offering up alternative app stores with cheaper prices to consumers, which would also mean lower commission payments back to Apple from developers.
Well, that's a fair few quid. How have Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg taken the news?
Given the mounting regulatory pressure globally, neither company has been quite as chilled as previous occasions when they've been hit with fines. Both of them have claimed the fines are unnecessary and that they'll both appeal. Perhaps the more important person to watch right now is US President Donald Trump, who has again voiced displeasure that US tech companies are being tightly regulated by foreign governments. The hope is that Don would leap into the aid of under-fire tech companies like Meta, and that's partly one of the reasons Mark Zuckerberg seemingly went full MAGA in the recent US election.
Oh, Mark, what have you done? Google have got problems too, though, haven't they?
They do, and this one feels more existential, and bizarrely, the US president has the potential to step in to reduce the pressure they're facing, but doesn't seem to be doing so, despite getting shirty that other countries are starting to regulate US tech companies. Currently, the US government is proposing a forced sale of Chrome, the browser made by Google, which they say could help break the company's dominance of the online advertising market, and this change could be seismic.
Well, it could be RIP Chrome. And, well, not to get too graphic and keep your eyes off my history, but the rules on what flavour of website you browse may be changing quite dramatically. I mean, it doesn't affect me one way or another, obviously, but what are Ofcom up to?
Things are about to change forever as the UK gears up for the Online Safety Act to start protecting users in July, and we've also just heard of specific rules designed to ensure children are safer online, which means there's going to be a greater focus on websites and services proving that you're over 18 rather than just assuming we're all responsible adults. So this could mean giving websites your credit card details to prove you're of age, or providing them with a copy of your passport or even your driving licence.
Can't see anything wrong with sending a scan of your passport to certain websites that other people would visit. It seems a bit unwise to be doing that, though, doesn't it?
Sharing our personal data with more organisations means more risk. And just imagine what happens if a hacker finds out who's been viewing porn sites and attempts to bribe or shame them into buying silence. Well, age verification and ensuring content can only be viewed by those deemed legal is admirable and should be the way everybody should be heading. It simply doesn't work right now, as lobbyists and politicians are suggesting. Let's not forget that just 6 years ago, our government's real-life solution to this problem was the suggestion that if adults wanted to view legal porn online, they would have had to prove they were old enough by heading down to the local newsagent and buying a scratch card to enable viewing of porn. But thankfully, this was torpedoed at the last minute. Despite much of the UK being online privacy concerned, the idea of uploading our faces or passports, if it means protecting younger people, seems to be growing popularity. And that means kids could also be kept off of unsuitable services like porn, social networks, or betting sites.
Quite right. I know, those poor other people. Are there any other solutions for those other people? Will they have to go back to buying magazines or something?
It's hard to say when this all ends, but there did used to be a stack of magazines in the hedge at the back of Trowbridge Park. Hopefully they're still there.
That's disgusting. Trowbridge Park, you say? Oh, sorry, and finally, there are people who tell you it costs nothing to be polite, but it turns out that's not true anymore, is it?
It's a sad state of affairs when the boss of OpenAI, the folk behind ChatGPT, bemoan the fact that too many people are saying please and thank you to its chatbots and are costing it millions of dollars in energy bills. It's possible that Sam Altman had his tongue firmly planted in his cheek when he posted that on X, but the reality is there is an absolutely huge energy cost behind every request and question you make to a chatbot. So while you're asking OpenAI to draw Steven Seagal as a Simpsons cast member, you've wasted more than a half a litre of water and the amount of electric required to charge your iPhone. Let's hope the bosses of OpenAI still say please and thank you if the US government offers them the chance to buy Chrome from Google, as they've put themselves forward as a potential buyer if the government breaks it up.
Will, thanks very much, mate. See you next week. Still to come on the Sunday 7 in association with Metro, RFK Jr. sees red and somebody's left a big mess in space. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a number of things. A conspiracy theorist, a vaccine skeptic, and of course, a brainworm survivor. He's also the United States Secretary of Health, and he's pledged that he'll make America healthy again. The thing is, things haven't got off to a great start, with labs closed down and senior scientists quitting in frustration, but this week saw his mission to clean up American food take what looks like a sensible step forward. He's banned petroleum-based food dyes in food, something that CBS senior medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook says is actually a sensible and necessary step, and that America is one of the few countries that still allows these dyes.
Red dye number 3 was approved, I just looked it up, in 1969. So a lot has happened since then. A lot of science has happened since then. Right. There are some animal studies, like in rats, that suggest maybe they can cause tumors of the thyroid, for example. There's some studies that suggest maybe it increases the risk of hyperactivity in children. Those risks are one of the reasons why California banned red dye number 3 in the fall of 2023. It's not been shown to be cause and effect, because it's hard to do those studies, but there's been this signal.
In the UK, food and food allergies are also a concern, although hopefully we have less petroleum-based food products. But one of the areas that's seen some positive progress recently is the treatment of food allergies, between new drugs that help the immune system and trials that show gradual desensitisation is possible. Professor Stephen Till is a professor of allergy at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospitals and at King's College London, and he explained to Sky News this week how a peanut a day might just keep the doctor away.
The principle of desensitisation is that you expose someone who's allergic to a particular allergen in small quantities, and then you gradually increase that over time. And that's what we did in these peanut allergic adults. We gave them tiny, really minuscule amounts of peanut protein, and then every 2 weeks we escalated this with the aim of eventually reaching equivalent of 4 whole peanuts every day. And 2/3 of the patients who started that could then tolerate these 4 peanuts daily at the end of the study. And in fact, most of them could tolerate greater amounts.
Space is a mess, and it's not just because of Elon Musk's habit of firing up dozens of Starlink satellites every couple of weeks, but because in mankind's rush to explore, we've left quite a lot of stuff lying around in Earth's orbit. There are an estimated 130 million pieces of space junk, from discarded rockets to bits of metal floating around the planet. The issue in part is that it's nobody's job to clean it up, and nobody has. But as more government and commercial missions head out to the Moon or Mars, it may become a much more serious problem. Carolin Frueh is an assistant professor of Aeronautics and Astronautics at Purdue University, and she specialises in space domain awareness and space traffic management. And she says the time's come for a bit more tidying up of space litter.
We have a larger number of active spacecraft in space at the moment than ever before. This means they are flying relatively dense to each other. So we want to be aware, avoiding collisions, but also be aware that we're not littering and leaving the space debris behind. Anything further out, where our GPS satellites are, where our TV satellites are, there's no mechanism bringing them down. They can stay there forever.
The rush to Mars is one of the things that will cause increases in space traffic, but despite Elon's fondest hopes, it's probably some distance away. We do know, however, that getting to Mars is going to be a pretty serious undertaking, and UK scientists are working on a plan which would see astronauts growing their own food on the years-long journey. Dr. Rodrigo Iamaro is the director of the Bezos Institute for Sustainable Protein at Imperial College London, and he's just launched a mini space lab on a Falcon 9 rocket. The aim is to grow protein using just a few cells in a bioreactor in a lab in a box in zero-gravity or microgravity conditions, which could make a huge difference to the cost of sending missions to Mars.
Just think that an astronaut consumes between half a kilo and 1.5 kilograms of food per day, and every kilogram we ship to space can be $20,000 US dollars. So imagine every meal can be something like $10,000. So what if we just make the food we need in space instead of bringing it from Earth?
Still to come on the Sunday 7 in association with Metro, we introduce you to a brand new colour and give you reasons to worry about bird flu. Sorry.
Right after this.
If you're a parent or share a fridge with someone, Instacart is about to make grocery shopping so much easier. Because with family carts, you can share a cart with your partner and each add the items you want. Since between the two of you, odds are you'll both remember everything you need. And this way, you'll never have to eat milkless cereal again. So minimize the stress of the weekly shop with family carts. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days. Excludes restaurants.
Welcome back.
This week saw scientists announce the discovery of a new colour. It's called Olo, and as we're a purist audio-only podcast, I'd describe it as a sort of vibrant bluey green. The process of discovery doesn't sound like a lot of fun, as the researchers fired laser pulses into the pupils of participants in the trial in order to stimulate the retina, and the findings were published in the journal Science Advances. There's been some doubt about the finding, though, which has been described as open to interpretation. But Professor Ren Ng, who's a professor of electrical engineering and computer sciences at the University of California at Berkeley, says it's a beautiful colour and that it may have implications for people who suffer from colour blindness.
To me, it felt like, now this is an analogy, but as if you went around the world and your whole life you just saw cream as the most saturated yellow you could see. So a very pale yellow. And then one day, for the first time, you chance upon a daffodil and you're just floored by how much more saturated yellow could be. That's what it felt like to me, okay? So I think one wouldn't say that's the most saturated cream I've ever seen. You'd want to give it a new name, and that's what we did here.
It's been 5 years now since the COVID-19 pandemic saw us all locked up and social distancing, but the bad news is we might be on the edge of another possible pandemic. Bird flu has been quietly spreading through America's farms, infecting cows and chickens and helping to create the famous egg shortage. More worryingly, though, 70 Americans have already contracted bird flu, with 1 death registered so far, and the Trump administration doesn't appear to be taking the threat seriously. Dr. Cameron Kahn is an infectious disease specialist at the University of Toronto, and he says the fact that the disease has progressed from chickens to cattle is a sign we should be genuinely concerned.
This is a threat that is very significant and very real, and I recognize also this is a moment where it's easy to sound like an alarmist. What I'm here to tell you is this is a very serious threat to humanity, and the longer we let this persist, the greater the risks are going to be. The world has never seen this kind of situation, and it's showing us that the virus is capable of adaptation. If you allow it, it will just get better and better at infecting other mammals, including potentially humans.
The disease has mainly been seen in the US so far, and most people who contracted it were farm workers who had mild symptoms. However, as we saw with COVID, these diseases can mutate quickly and become much more severe and more transmissible. The concerns are amplified by the fact that under Donald Trump, the US is becoming less engaged with organisations like the United Nations and the World Health Organization. In fact, the WHO has just drafted a new legally binding agreement aimed at improving the speed of reaction to pandemics, but the US has announced it won't be taking part. The WHO Director for Preparedness and Pandemic Prevention is Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove, and she says whilst it's a concern, there is still data flowing.
The US has signaled its intent to leave WHO. They are still communicating with PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, which is our regional office in the Americas. They are continuing to report cases of avian influenza, for example, through the international health regulations. And there's still a free press within the US, in terms of information that's being shared. There are states, there are research research institutions that are testing patients, that are caring for patients, that are sharing genetic sequences with GISAID, the platforms that are online, for example. So information is coming out. But yes, the point, if the US does actually withdraw from WHO, what would that mean?
We're 2 years into a coral bleaching event that's now being described as the most intense in recorded history. Coral bleaching occurs when heat stress affects the algae that live inside coral reefs, causing them to release toxins that then sees the reef reject them. What's left behind isn't the colourful coral we're familiar with, but instead a stark white skeletal outline that's then at a heightened risk of dying. The current bleaching event is the fourth since 1998, and according to the International Coral Reef Initiative, there's a real risk that the sea temperatures may never drop to a level where things go back to normal. The estimate from the ICRI is that 84% of the world's coral reefs are now affected, and Derek Manzello, who's a marine biologist and coordinator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Coral Reef Watch, good blimey, I'd like to see the size of his business card, says the impact on marine life could be severe.
Unfortunately, corals are the ecosystem engineer, so a good analogy would be trees in an old-growth forest. So they're really responsible for the entire habitat that 25% or 1 in 4 of every living thing in the ocean is depending on. So if corals die enough and you have erosion of the reef structure, then essentially you're losing that habitat, and this could cause a loss in that biodiversity.
This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.
Ever wonder what your lashes are destined for? The cards have spoken. Maybelline New York Mascara does it all. Whether you crave fully fan lashes with Lash Sensational, big, bold volume from the Colossal, a dramatic lift with Falsies Lash Lift, or natural-looking volume from Great Lash, your perfect lash future awaits. Manifest your best mascara today. Shop Maybelline New York and discover your lash destiny. Shop now at Walmart.